Good evening, I'm Lori Tucker. It has been 10 years this week since the heinous kidnappings, rapes, and murders of a young Knoxville couple. It was a crime that forever changed two local families, resulted in several new laws, and led to years upon years of court proceedings. WATE6 on your side anchor Kristen Farley is remembering the Christian-Newsom murders 10 years later. Kristen.
Well, Lori, what took place 1 decade ago this week forever changed so many lives. The randomness of these crimes left our community in fear. And for the victims' families, they have been forced to constantly relive this nightmare. Appearing in court, they tell us more than 350 times in their pursuit of justice. January 6th, 2007, 21-year-old Shannon Christian and her boyfriend, 23-year-old Chris Newsom, do not arrive at a friend's party and never return home to their parents. They were last seen at the Washington Ridge Apartments. January 7th, a train conductor reports a body found near the railroad tracks and 9th Avenue in East Knoxville. It wasn't until the next day we learned the bound and burned body was that of Christopher Newsom. Later, it was revealed he had been raped, beaten, and shot. Tim Miller was our first reporter on the scene.
We started hearing on Sunday from family members that the two young people were missing, and that's when we learned about the discovery of Chris's body.
In the hours that followed, fear set in about Shannon's fate, Chris's own father fighting back tears.
He would not have hesitated one moment with her in danger without putting his life on the line. He was that type.
Meanwhile, friends and family start their own massive search. That search leading to Shannon's abandoned 4Runner, not far from where Chris's body was found.
We're all hoping for the best right now. We're hoping that we do able to find her and that she is still alive.
January 9th, fingerprints found in Shannon's car lead investigators to this house, 2316 Chipman Street. A body is found, but not immediately identified. Family and friends fear the worst. Later, investigators confirm Shannon is dead. She was found in a trash can, beaten, raped, and bleach was poured down her throat. The medical examiner determined she suffocated in that trash can. Our legal expert remembers what it was like as the true details of this crime started to leak out.
Then the injuries and the extent of the torture and how the victims appeared when they were found started kind of permeating out. And you really saw people, prosecutors, that you could tell, I mean, veteran prosecutors that have done this for years, that they were impacted, that they couldn't talk about it. So this was a very horrific, and sinister is a good word, crime that just impacted and touched everyone involved, and then that feeling started to permeate throughout the community.
Again, I think everyone here in the Knoxville area remembering these two young lives, and you heard just a moment ago from then Sergeant Tim Snodderly. He is now a lieutenant with the Knoxville Police Department. Now his connection here really goes beyond just an investigator. He knew Chris and the Newsom family, and today he sat down with us to talk about identifying Chris's body and having to tell the family the heartbreaking news.
That's tough. Yeah, it was tough, especially as a kid that you knew that had been at your house. He'd been at my house with my oldest boy that played baseball together. Chris had really distinct eyes, and I mentioned this before, you know, so when we got to the forensic center and they started unwrapping him, you know, where they had put the stuff on his head, I recognized it was Chris.
Snodderly went on to say that Chris was from a good family and a good kid, something we heard over and over again about both of these victims over the last 10 years. He considers the parents to be victims here as well, their ordeal still lasting through today. Next in this case was the search for suspects. Who did this and why? We're going to walk you through how investigators tracked down those responsible, some hiding out across state lines. We have that part of the story coming up tonight at 6.
You know, it's tough to look back at some of the worst moments our community has faced, but sometimes the magnitude of what happened demands it, and that's the case with the events of the first weeks of 2007. WATE6 on your side anchor Kristen Farley is remembering the Christian-Newsom murders 10 years later.
Well, Lori, earlier we revisited the beginnings of this crime. Chris Newsom's body found burned by the railroad tracks in East Knoxville. 2 days later, Shannon's body found inside a trash can at a house on Chipman Street. By the next day, we knew the names of 2 of the suspects, and a manhunt was underway. The first 2 names coming from police, half-brothers Lamarcus Davidson and Vanessa Coleman. Davidson had lived at the Chipman Street home and already faced aggravated robbery and carjacking charges. He had not been out of prison for long and was already wanted in Knoxville for driving on a suspended license. But it was a tip a day later that led to Lebanon, Kentucky. State, federal, and local law enforcement agencies, even the Knox County Sheriff himself, teaming up to arrest Cobbins and another suspect, George Thomas.
The finger pointing almost always happens if there's more than one person involved in a murder. It's always, I didn't really pull the trigger. So-and-so's the one that really killed him. I didn't do that. Now, I was there, but, you know, and you see that. And that's exactly what started happening. During the interrogation, Cobbins saying that he saw Davidson and another suspect, Eric Boyd, commit the carjacking.
They jump out of the car and run to a white SUV. And there was 2 people, a man and a woman at the SUV. They jump in, pointed guns at them, and they carjacked him, I guess.
The same day Cobbins was caught, the search back here in Knoxville led to a home on Reynolds Street and Lamarcus Davidson. We would later learn it was Boyd who actually told police to go there.
Everyone we were looking for, we have found, and we now are talking to them.
However, a few days later, another arrest in Kentucky. Cobbins' girlfriend, Vanessa Coleman, she admitted to being at the Chipman Street home the night of the crime and that she had been told it was Davidson, Cobbins, and Thomas who burned Chris's body. Coleman also telling investigators she saw the men repeatedly go in and out of the bedroom where Shannon was tied up and blindfolded.
He had jumped her and she was laying on the floor. He hollered at me to come in there and check her pulse. He said that he couldn't tell if she was dead or not.
And Davidson had been talking to investigators too.
He said, well, am I gonna die? And I don't want that.
The specifics of his story kept changing over the course of 2.5 hours as he laid blame on the others. Cobbins for the carjacking, Thomas for killing Newsom, and he insisted he did not rape Shannon Christian.
I don't know him at all. I had never saw him before in my life.
The details of this crime just so difficult to walk through. At this point, we do have 5 people captured and charged. Next, we head to the courtroom, the process of seeking justice that stretched on for years. The parents of the 2 young people having to sit through the evidence that would turn your stomach and break your heart. That's beginning tomorrow at 5:30.
Well, this week marks 10 years since the murders of Shannon Christian and Chris Newsom, and we've been looking back, walking you through that terrible crime, the manhunt, the trials. But even those 5 guilty verdicts were not the end. WATE 6 on your side anchor Kristen Farley shows us the next unbelievable chapter.
You know, sometimes we tell you about court decisions being overturned, mistakes made in court cases, and every so often rules are broken. But what happened surrounding Judge Richard Baumgartner, the man overseeing the Christian-Newsom trials, is still a shock to many people. People in court got a clue that something was wrong at the end of the Vanessa Coleman trial in 2010. The judge slurring his words and sounding sleepy as he led the jury through the charges.
Go to paragraph B.
Not guilty.
Paragraph C.
Not guilty.
Former DA Randy Nichols says his office didn't know how bad off Baumgartner really was.
Everybody knew Judge Baumgartner suffered from physical injuries and was not overly spry. We knew that, so when you would see him, it wouldn't raise much suspicion.
January 27th, 2011, an announcement that Judge Richard Baumgartner would be taking a leave of absence for medical reasons. The next day, the TBI confirming to us it was investigating Baumgartner and had been for some time. March 10th, Baumgartner pleads guilty to state charges of official misconduct, admitting his addiction to prescription painkillers.
I stand here today a humble man. I have lately let this system and this community down. let my family down.
The plea deal giving him judicial diversion, and he resigns from the bench. Attorneys for the Christian-Newsom murder start putting the wheels in motion for the sentences to be overturned. In June, a sign that there might be more to this from the ex-wife of a man prosecutors had identified as the judge's dealer.
Richard Gornberger, he got a smack on the hand. He walked out. He should have had, do more than a treatment, I think. He was buying multiple pills I knowed of.
She was right, which would come out in December of that year. The TBI's report full of eye-popping details. Dina Castleman, a woman in Baumgartner's drug court, saying the two had a sexual relationship and she supplied him with pills, 30, twice a week, for about a year, even visiting her while she was in the hospital during the Davidson trial to get his fix. So, Judge John Kerry Blackwood issued his decision.
Motions for new trial are all granted.
You heard it there. Judge Richard Baumgartner would eventually serve around 5.5 months in a federal prison over what was in that file. He was released in 2013.